Hey everyone, it's Rachel from Sugar Maple Farmhouse, and today I'm going to show you how to make fall-inspired leaf and flower pressed candles. With fall coming up, these leaf pressed candles are the perfect way to add some fall touches to your home. I did this craft on pillar candles and taper candles, and I'm going to talk to you about the challenges, show you each of them, and give you some tips and tricks. Let's get started. First, to begin, you're going to need wax paper, your candles, and dried flowers and leaves. I actually tried this craft in a couple different ways, and I found that this method that I'm going to show you works best. Cut the wax paper to size and then pick out the flowers or leaves that you want to use for this craft. I picked mine out based on the size and shape of the candles and what might stick the best to each candle. I do want to add that I found the taper candles the most difficult when it came to this craft just because of their size. They're smaller, they have less surface, and they melt faster. I ruined quite a few tapered candles trying to get this right. So if you don't get it right on the first try, keep trying. Practice makes perfect with this one. So when you do this on the tapered candles, you want to make sure that the wax side of the wax paper is facing your candle. So it's wax on wax. And I am using a blow dryer here, but you can use a heat gun if you have one. I actually ended up buying a heat gun after this because I thought that might be easier to use than the blow dryer. So as I mentioned, I found the tapered candles the most difficult because the blow dryer or a heat gun will actually start to melt parts of the taper if you let it get too hot. There is a sweet spot between where you're melting the candle just enough for the leaf to stick and the wax from the wax paper to stick it onto the candle. The actual time that you need to have the heat on the candle will depend on the leaf that you're using. I found things like this orange one that I'm doing with more kind of branches and leafy pieces took a lot longer than some other ones that were just straight leaves. That said, I do think that the taper candles turned out kind of the most beautiful. They're really delicate and feminine and pretty looking, and I really enjoyed that look on them. Plus, it's just a little bit of extra special detail on the taper candles. I'm going to show you a second taper candle here because this one I actually added a couple elements to the taper itself, and that kind of adds another layer of complexity. So you want to do these one at a time. And again, the taper candle makes it a little harder because it's smaller, but if you just cut your wax paper down to size, you can add individual elements and then you can have a little bit of a more dynamic taper candle. I will say that I found some of the flowers in the fall colors easier to add on to the candles just because the flowers themselves are thinner than the leaves, so it didn't take quite as much heat for them to stick to the candles. You can also use a piece of wax paper a couple of times. I got away with about 2 to 3 times per piece of wax paper that I cut, and that just made me kind of waste less wax paper. Once you get to about 3 uses, there's not enough wax left on the wax paper to help your leaf or your flower stick to the candle itself. When it comes to the leaves and flowers that I'm using on the pressed leaf candle craft, I will leave you a link to some flowers that you can purchase, or you can use leaves and flowers from your own yard. You just have to press them before you start the craft with them. And if you don't want to kind of wait for them to dry out and press, I will also leave a link to a microwave flower press that works fairly quickly and fairly well to try and kind of speed up the process for creating this craft. I have it, and I have found that it works really well for drying most of our flowers here at home. For bigger flowers like dahlias or something like that, it doesn't seem to work as well as I'd like. But those aren't really the flowers you're going to be using for this craft anyways. They're kind of just too big. The most challenging part of the taper candles is the taper part itself at the top. You can see the part that I'm doing now. It's just because it's so thin and the wax melts so quickly that the wax on the paper doesn't really have a chance to start melting and hold your flower on. However, if you're using a flower that's small enough and thin enough, you should be able to get it to work. My favorite candles to decorate for this craft were the pillar candles. It's really because you could use much larger leaves on them, so I felt like they just turned out more fall-like. Plus, because the wax is thicker, you don't end up really melting a ton of the wax and have the same kind of issues that you did, or that I did, with the taper candles. One of the other challenges with working with the taper candles too is that the blow dryer, or if you are using a heat gun, the same thing will happen, is that the blow dryer made my fingers really hot and I couldn't hold the wax paper for that long. I did not have that same issue with the pillar candles just because they're so much thicker and the candle itself kind of guarded my fingers. Again, I will leave a link in the description below to a place where you can buy some of the dried leaves if you don't have access to dried leaves. If you live in an apartment, condo, or townhome, you might not have a lot of choices there, and this will give you a good variety of leaf choices and colors. I actually don't have a ton of trees here other than the sugar maples that we've planted, and I did this craft before the leaves started turning, so I needed some extra leaves and had to purchase those too. Once you do get into working with the larger leaves, you have to move the blow dryer around a little more over the surface of it just to make sure that all the pieces of it are sticking. I in particularly found an issue kind of with the stems at the bottom where the leaf would have attached to the tree. There's kind of like a little knob there. I took that off of most of my leaves just because I could not get that to stick, and it was thicker than the stem itself, so it just also kind of made the candle a little lumpy whenever it did stick. Also, if you really love to press flowers and don't have a great place to store them, I'll leave a link to the box that I am using here. I use it particularly for this and my dried leaves and flowers, but my daughter has one too. She loves friendship bracelets, and it stores all of her friendship bracelet materials in a nice kind of convenient way, and then everything is not laying all over my house. For this pillar candle and the other ones that I made, I ended up using one piece of wax for the entire candle. And the reason I was able to get away with that is because I was using different parts of the wax paper to hold the leaves on, since they were in different places on the candle and the surface was so wide. So you can probably get away with using one piece of wax paper too if you are doing a very large candle, and using different places on that wax paper to help hold your leaf down. One of kind of the most interesting things about this project is that you can actually use faux candles for this too. So if you don't want to use real candles, if you're worried about kind of the wax, the hot wax dripping over the leaves or anything like that, you can use faux candles that have a wax on the outside. And most faux candles do. It works just the same way that it worked with the real pillar candles and the taper candles, using the wax paper, the leaves, and the blow dryer or the heat gun. This here is one of my faux candles that I made, and I love the idea that now I kind of have these forever. I'm not huge into using faux candles, but sometimes I think if you're going to do a craft like this, that using the faux candles can be better, because then you can create something that will last season after season for you. You can see this yellow flower that I'm working on here on the faux candle was one of the more difficult flowers to add just because the center of it is raised a little bit more. Whenever you run into that, you'll probably have that same problem. The leaves will stick first. The center kind of takes a little longer. So you have to just determine if you want to try to use that. You can go back in with the paper. You can heat it more. You may lose a petal or two like I did here, but you can actually usually still get those to apply if you put the heat gun back on the flower itself like I did here. And here are some of the finished candles. Thank you guys so much for joining me today. I hope that you love this fall-inspired leaf pressed candle craft, and I hope that I will see you again. If you've not subscribed to our channel, go ahead and hit the subscribe button now so you can keep up with everything we're doing here on the farm. I cook, I craft, and I garden. So if you love any of those things, I hope you'll join us here. Also, if you want more information on this craft and a step-by-step tutorial, I will leave a link to the full blog post in the description below. If you have any questions or comments, you can leave those in the description below too. Thanks so much, everyone. Have a great day.